Good morning, it's day 163. My last full day on the PCT. Setting off this morning, I want to tell you about a dream I had last night. My campsite is back in there among the scrub bushes. And I was living in an area that looks very much like this, sort of like the California chaparral, with big granite boulders that are like an old set from the original Star Trek series. And there were several other people who were living in this area with me, sort of like in a dispersed camp, if you will. And I and the others were all undergraduates. It's a dream, you just kind of got to go with it, right? And it was going into finals week, so I had term papers to complete, I had to prepare for my final exams, and I was getting ready for moving out of that area, right? That was like my dorm, I guess, our dorm. And so I had sort of all these things going on, and I had I had a safe, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to move this big, like, old bank vault safe out of the wilderness. And when I woke up, it was like, well, the parallels are pretty obvious. I guess I see myself as a perpetual undergraduate. And I'm getting ready for the next phase. I'm in the last week, in my last full day. Figuring out my logistics home, etc. But then, what was the image of the safe? What was this? Why was that there in the dream? And what was its significance? So I started pondering it. And I think the safe represents the weight of the things that I have accumulated throughout the Thru-hike. The thoughts, the feelings, maybe even some of the experiences that I need to figure out a way to express, move on, arrange for their transfer, etc. So maybe today I need to do that, because when I get to the monument tomorrow morning, it's going to be going to the monument, taking a few pictures, a little ceremony, maybe a little champagne, and then, boom, I'm in San Diego. So the thoughts that I have been able to make in the past, after the Thru-hike is done, and I'm hiking back out on the approach trail, or the case of the CDT, a couple days to get to the nearest roadhead, is got to be done today. So get a chance to see the other side of me this way. I have to hold this in my left hand, just due to where the sun is. My first thought today is where I kind of have to begin, where I have begun before on my thoughts on the other Thru-hikes that I've done, is with a profound sense of gratitude. I'm grateful for the trail maintainers, the administrators. I'm grateful for the people who had the vision and foresight to develop these trails. A couple nights ago, I was having a pizza in a bar and grill, and there's some people down the bar who found out, I was hiking the PCT, and they just asked, well, like, what's the best thing about the PCT? And my answer was, doing a through hike like this restores your faith in humanity. You see people as they are, and people from all walks of life, all ages, all ethnicities, political persuasions, how generous the American people are with their time, with their offers of assistance, a meal, trail magic, etc. It's there all the time, everywhere. Just yesterday, as the sun was setting, I was getting some water in a Forest Service campground, and a woman came up, stopped her van, got out, came over and asked if I was hiking the PCT, and I said I was, and she asked me if I needed anything. They were going to go into the store, and I said, no, I really have everything I need. And she said, well, if there was something that you would want, what would it be? An ice cream or something like that. In that case, I declined, but I do want to illustrate one thing here. When I was a young man and full of the notions of being self-sufficient and, the Marlboro Man, or, whatever, routinely I would decline offers of assistance, even when I really needed that assistance. Silly pride. And I've gotten over a lot of that, but when I was on the CDT, I learned a lesson from a hiker by the name of Mountain Prana, and he's a practicing Buddhist, and one of the things that he would say is, you have to allow people to be generous to you. You have to allow them that, because it may not be just about you. It may be about them. You need to allow them to be a generous person towards you. Now, in this particular case, I ended up declining. I didn't want these people to go to the town and, they're doing their grocery shopping or whatever. They come back with an ice cream or whatever. And and it's an hour later, and I couldn't afford to wait there for an hour just to receive their ice cream bar. But this is probably a more general lesson that we all can put into practice in our daily lives, that we should allow people to be generous to us. The other thing that I want to say about gratitude is, it occurs to me that gratitude is one of these things that it's impossible to overdo, to have too much of it. There's sort of no downside to this. It's sort of one of these pure things, like the laughter of an infant in looking in his mother's eyes, that is just, there's no negative there at all. But yeah, you can't overdo this. There is no Aristotelian mean with respect to gratitude. We all need to be more grateful about everything than we are. And doing a through hike like this brings that gratitude to the fore. The next thing that I want to address from my dream, and the safe that has to be moved, is some events which happened during this through hike that, in category anyway, are related to one another. I've addressed directly the unexpected death of my cousin Noel. When that happened, I was in a very remote part of Northern California. Saw no one for a few days. A few road crossings, etc. And I think for the first day, my vocabulary consisted of a single word: launching F-bombs at the rocks and the trees who didn't hear me, at the birds who didn't care. But in my shock and grief, that's all I could articulate. As it played out, I stayed on the trail. That was not shortly thereafter what I had intended to do, but just due to things that I won't get into, I stayed on the trail. There have been other things, broken relationship, unexpected also. That caused a similar sense of shock and grief and, in its own way, mourning. There have been smaller events, and in that latter, I have addressed it previously, although a little circumspect in order to preserve other people's privacy. There have been other events, though, that, while smaller, I haven't addressed at all for one reason or another. But together, they comprise loss, grief, suffering, mourning, even a sense of survivor guilt, if you will. I'm thinking of the book by C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed, in which he described the aftermath of the passing of his wife. They'd only been married a few years. I can't remember the exact words that he used, but the intent, the feeling, I will paraphrase here. Grief is a mess. It's a god-awful mess. It's just a mess. And so I have found it. I want to say a few things here. I know there are people who are subscribers to this channel who have suffered on a scale much greater than me during this very same period. In no wise do I mean to equate my loss, my suffering, my grief with yours. I don't. I'm sure there are others watching, maybe not subscribers, never comment, etc., who are in the same boat. The other thing I want to say is hiking helps. Hiking helps. There's a routine. You got to pack up. You got to move. You got some miles to go. Otherwise, you're not going to have any water. There's a goal. And many goals, before you get to the terminus. Hiking helps. You're being out in nature. You're seeing natural beauty. You're in the quietude. You breathe 40-degree air at night. It's clean, but you're cozy inside your sleeping bag. These things provide comfort. They help. They help, but they're not a panacea. Just like the kind words to someone who has lost a loved one, well-meaning and truly, truly from the heart kind and understanding, they don't fix the grief. They don't. It's not all better. Maybe a little better than it would otherwise have been, but it's not, well, it's just all okay, because you're out on a through hike and we're all good here. It's a mess. It's a god-awful mess. And these things, like I said one day, like if you fell off a catwalk, that would leave a mark. These things will leave a mark. Some wounds never heal. There may be a scab, there may be a scar tissue, but it's not all okay. So when I think of when I will think back on this through hike, there will be things that I think of with delight and joy. But I will think of loss, suffering, grief, mourning, being in mourning. It probably doesn't come through in most of the daily videos, but it's been there as an undercurrent for half the trail and more. There were days, sometimes a few in a row, several in a row, where there was no joy at all. I felt no joy at all. Very hard to find any delight at all. So that will always be part of the things that are locked away in that safe that I was dreaming about, that will constitute the experience of this through hike. I think I'll put the camera away now and just compose my thoughts further. As I'm going up the PCT on this road, it's a dirt road. The next thing in my safe of this trip and its meaning and its discoveries that I've made is the notion of narrative, what I've learned. And I'm not going to address any of the sort of literary things, Boccaccio, Chaucer, etc. I want to return to how I originally addressed it as a psychological notion. The narratives we tell ourselves about the world, about those close to us, and about those we tell ourselves. I'm not going to address too much the first one. The more I have thought about it, the more pervasive, I mean I'm seeing it everywhere, just everywhere, and certainly within myself. A narrative is a story that has many different elements and would have many different, shall we say, facts or facts. Some of which are true, and some of which aren't true. But it occurs to me the outright fabrications are not as common as the ones that have some element of truth in them, which makes them all the more powerful. But what happens is we selectively choose these elements and they become part of the fabric of the story, of the narrative. We cherry pick them. We cherry pick the ones we want, and we just ignore those that are, shall we say, inconvenient truths, and they just bounce off us. I mean, we don't even remember them when presented to us. And It's called confirmation bias. You know, we go looking for the stuff that reinforces what we already believe. And because they form this fabric, the narrative then becomes much, much more resilient, much stronger than any one of those elements or facts or data or whatever. Such that someone points out that this thing isn't true, I mean, it's an outright fabrication or it's not important. Even if we have to admit that that's true, we then just close in and the narrative goes on much as before. It doesn't fall apart. It also occurs to me that almost all of these are used as a defense mechanism. We're afraid, we are confused, we feel threatened. We feel threatened. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And this is a way that we reinforce that we're really a good person, and well, we're not as bad as most people are, and that we and people like us, well, we're the ones who see the light. We're above average. We're like the children in Lake Wobegon. Everyone above average. It's not true. Of course, we know this intellectually, but try to tell yourself that. You won't believe it. So it's a defense mechanism, and therefore is just incredibly powerful. Yeah, this is sort of like fight or flight kind of animalistic, primitive thinking. Yeah. I think narratives can be used not just to defend ourselves, but to defend those who are close to us, with whom we have, bonds of affection of one sort or another. We fail to see their flaws, their humanity. See them as they are. Obviously, that's hazardous because that's not the way they really are. Yeah. Let me move on to something else. So, just today, I saw a post on social media from an old friend of mine. And I'll say right off the bat, I know her. I've known her since we were teenagers. She's a good person. But on social media, she was ranting today because at a UN meeting on climate change, in which apparently the delegates passed some sort of, non-binding resolution or whatever, saying we should eat less beef. The caterer had provided a menu option of beef on the menu for the conference, and it was apparently like some sort of good cut. I don't know, like ground sirloin instead of ground chuck or something. And she went on this long rant about this. And it occurs to me that, well, number one, what's gnawing at her is not what they were gnawing on at this conference, right? Of all the ills in the world, the low-level hypocrisy of having a menu option of beef, in which the delegates say, hey, maybe we should cut back on beef production. That's nowhere near the top. Does not bear a rant, which tells me there's a whole lot bothering her that has absolutely nothing to do with beef, or maybe it has something to do with climate change, who knows. And it's sublimated, comes out, because it's not finding a natural outlet that she can express her frustration or outrage over perhaps completely different things. And this gets to another sense in which earlier I was talking about grief. Let me check gut hooks here. Make sure I'm on the trail. Yeah. I saw this sign. And in fact, this is I didn't notice it in my talking, a sort of a point where the trail leaves the road. Let me complete my thought. Another sense of grief, in this sense of grievance. Now, grievance is, shall we say, the dark side of grief. It's not mourning. It's a real problem, but a problem someone else has caused for you or me. And today, too often, simply due to commercial needs, shall we say, people are fed a diet of grievance narrative. Why? Well, if you're pissed off, you're going to continue to watch that show. You're outraged about this or that. So if they can distort a little bit, to make you feel like, especially, you're being threatened by something, someone, some situation, some force, some UN delegates eating ground sirloin, I don't know. It becomes part of the fabric of the narrative, and it can reinforce, well, it does reinforce it. In some cases, I think, completely creates narratives that we have about the larger world. But I think maybe that's all I want to say about that. There are issues there that are so big. They're too big for me. I need to worry more about taking the log out of my own eye instead of taking the speck out of my brother's. Improving myself. Finding those narratives within myself that are unhelpful, ungenerous, beneath me. I think I'll turn the camera off again. Well, this is south, or maybe south-southeast, something like that. I mean, those mountains in the distance have to be in Mexico. I'm less than 10 air miles from the border. I call this the magic hour. The wind settles down, the birds, the animals, all finding their place for the night. For them, the day is done. But I like to go hiking through this time and through the land at this time of day. It's beautiful. Aqua and hot pink. Changing by the minute. Mountains in the distance. Ooh, whoa. Oh, Dave, you need to turn around and look behind you. I'm SoBo again. Yeah, I'm going to get a still of that. And as the sun sets behind me, I guess I have sort of this parting thought for the day. I'm kind of glad I'm going to do some night hiking here for probably a couple hours to get down into the Campo area. I don't recall that this is terribly technical with rocks and, you know, steep side gratings, etc. But there's just something that feels right about my last full day on the PCT, and you know, going down to Campo, which I think I can see the lights of right now in the distance. There's something about night hiking that's like especially introspective. You see what's sort of right in front of you as far as the steps go, but you're not distracted by things like a glorious sunset. Me and my thoughts.